Resident Evil The Final Chapter, released by Sony Pictures in 2016 or 2017 depending on your region. It is the sixth and final entry in the Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil film series and follows on from Resident Evil Retribution. Not that I'd imagine anyone really cares at this point, but this review will contain major spoilers, so continue on at your own risk if you haven't seen this film yet and you want to avoid spoilers. So the movie starts in the usual fashion these movies do, and that is completely abandoning what they'd set up at the end of the last film. If your memory's a bit fuzzy, I'll fill you in. The last film ended with it turning out Albert Wesker is now seemingly a good guy, and he brings the protagonists to the White House to make a last stand against the zombie hordes. But then this movie starts with Alice all alone after the big battle, and the other heroes are nowhere to be seen. Leon, Jill, Ada, they're all just completely absent now, and it's not explained if something happened to them or what. They're just gone, and it's just Alice now, though Claire does show up later, but I couldn't help feel a bit disappointed in the fact they just ditched all these other major characters with no explanation. I think they all just got killed off screen maybe, but I did feel a bit let down, with Jill especially, as she was a major character in these films since the second one. And then in the last movie they had that bit like in Resident Evil 5 where she's being controlled and they have to destroy that red thing that controls her, but now after all that and all the films she was in, she's just now gone with no explanation. But mind you, this is actually kinda accurate if you think about it, because in the games, canonically, we haven't seen her since Resident Evil 5 either. She has been in Revelations and the Resident Evil 3 remake, but those are prequels to those events, but we haven't actually seen her in the game timeline since Resident Evil 5 either, so I guess that is kind of accurate. But yeah, I think all the main good guys besides Alice and Claire are now just gone with no closure or anything, which kinda sucks. Then, after Alice leaves Washington DC, while she's travelling, she gets captured by Umbrella again, and it's that same bad doctor guy from the previous films. I think he's been the baddie since the second film, I think, if I'm remembering it right. And then they're in these armoured tank things, and Alice is being pulled behind one of them with zombies chasing her. And now all the zombies are the type of zombies that run now for some reason. And then Alice tries to escape, and she's on top of the tank fighting the bad doctor guy. And this bit was kind of hard to watch, as like every nanosecond the camera angle cuts like all the way through every second of the fight scene, and I could hardly even follow what was supposed to be happening. It was just like in the second film when she fights the Nemesis. They just go mad with the camera cuts and you can't even see anything. I'd assume this is probably to hide the low quality fight coordination. So then she escapes and goes to a building with some survivors, and they let her in, and Claire is there among them by some incredible coincidence. And then I think Alice speaks to the Red Queen, and it tells her she has to go back to the hive in Raccoon City and get an antivirus and release it into the air to stop the zombies for good. So then she and the others go there, and I think it was kind of cool how for the last movie they decided to go back to where the first one was, like the story has come full circle. I'd say this is where the film starts to pick up a bit as well, as I did find the first half pretty boring if I'm honest, but I'd say the second half was a bit better. I did like how when they get to the hive we see some familiar areas, which was pretty cool. Like we see, I think it was a couple of the same corridors, and we see the laser trap room again. I thought that was cool because at the end the lasers activate in the laser room and the walls are all dusty, but then when the lasers pass down the room it kind of burns the grime away and it looks all clean again along the path of the lasers. I'll try and find a picture or a clip of that scene to illustrate what I'm talking about, but I did think that was a cool little touch they added. So yeah, I did like how they go to the hive again, and there's no Raccoon City left above it, it's just a huge crater now. So then, when they get to the hive, they discover the bad scientist guy's there, and the one we saw earlier was a clone of him. But now, for some weird reason, they've added in this kind of strange religious motive for him for doing what he'd been doing, which was never in any of the previous films, and so he decided to release the T-virus into Raccoon City on purpose now, and him and the other Umbrella executives were being kept in suspended animation like the hive was Noah's Ark or something. It was really strange and came out of nowhere. You really can tell they were making it up as they went along with these films. I get the feeling like as they made each one, they weren't sure if they were guaranteed another sequel yet, and there's a lot of strange things that just happen out of the blue or get retconned. It's very odd. There's next to no continuity with these films. And also, Albert Wesker is there, but it turns out he's not a goodie like at the end of the last film, he's a baddie again. And you'll never guess how he gets killed. Albert Wesker, the big bad long-time antagonist since the third film, he gets his foot cut off in an automatic door and starts bleeding out, and then when the hive self-destructs he just gets blown up with it. Like, after all that, what we've been through, and the whole journey over the course of these movies, and how he was the main bad guy in the games and everything, he just gets his foot cut off and then gets blown up. Like, just how anticlimactic and lame and underwhelming is that? And then the big twist at the end is that all along, it turns out that Alice is a clone of this old woman in a wheelchair who owns Umbrella, and I think she didn't want to do all the bad things like make the T-virus and all that, so she cloned herself as a superhuman using the T-virus, so the clone would take down Umbrella or something. And then Alice gets the antivirus after defeating the baddie and releases it, and it actually seemed like she was going to die because she has the T-virus in her system since that's how they created her, but she doesn't die. But I do give them some props as I actually thought she was going to die and it was a surprise when she didn't. I think it might have been a better ending if she did, so it's like she sacrificed herself, but that's just me. And then she gets the old woman's memories so she can remember her past, because she always couldn't remember, but now she can. So for a score, I'd probably give it 3.5 out of 10. So yeah, not the worst of these films, but definitely not the best either. Overall, it was pretty dumb and kind of boring like the other sequels. I have to say, I really don't think there had to be 6 of these movies. They could have easily just made it a trilogy instead of dragging it on, as after the second one it really felt like a bit of a grind to finish watching all these. I think they should have come up with a better story and just made a third and final movie to finish this series off instead. They should have kept it closer to the games like they did with the first 2 as well. Like, from the third one onwards, it started to feel a bit more like an action-y version of The Walking Dead, rather than feeling like Resident Evil. So that concludes my reviews of the Paul Anderson Resident Evil films. Overall, would I say they're worth watching? Not really. I'd say if you're a fan of the classic games, then watch the first 2, but keep your expectations very low. And if you haven't seen the other 4, like I hadn't before I decided to buy the box set, I'd probably just not bother with them. They're pretty boring and don't really add anything, and have very little to do with the games outside of a few cameos from some classic characters. They just kind of meander about the place without much rhyme or reason. I wouldn't even call them dumb fun or a guilty pleasure either, as they're kind of bland and felt like a chore to get through. I think I paid about 12 quid or something for the Blu-ray box set, and even at that I still don't know if I'd recommend picking it up. So that was my review of Resident Evil The Final Chapter, but I'm far from finished from reviewing all the Resident Evil films, as I had a look on Amazon, and Welcome to Raccoon City comes out next month, so when I get that, I'll definitely review that as well. And I also have the second and third CGI movies left to review as well, so stay tuned for those. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.